Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining Tribe Public today. I'm John Heerdink. For those of you that don't know this face, I apologize for the way I look, but I am who I am, and I'm sure you are who you are. But I really appreciate all of you for joining the Tribe today, Tribe Public, and really embracing what we're about, which is connecting and giving this direct corporate access that is not usually available to many investors around the world, to meet the CEOs, founders, CFOs, leaders of NYSE and NASDAQ companies that you care about. And thank you for being part of the process and forwarding your questions today. And in this session, we have Atossa Therapeutics, and we have the CEO and founder, Dr. Stephen Quay, MD, Ph.D., and also the CFO of Atossa, Kyle Guse. I appreciate you, gentlemen, for joining us today as well. Gentlemen, we have literally investors from around the world, from where Dr. Quay, sometimes from the Far East, to New York, to Israel, to Canada, to all over the U.S. And beyond. I really appreciate all of you joining. Dr. Quay, would you start today by introducing yourself, a little bit about your background? You have a fascinating life, career, et cetera, and I do appreciate getting to know you so well over the years, and I'm excited about Atossa and where you're headed. But could you tell us a little about yourself today?
Sure can, John, and thank you for having us here. It's really a pleasure to be with the tribe, as you've called it here. So, yes, I'm Dr. Stephen Quay, MD, PhD in biochemistry from the University of Michigan. And then a postdoc in chemistry at MIT while I was doing my residency at the Mass General. Taught for about 10 years at Stanford Medical School when I started my first company to commercialize the MRI contrast agent, the gadolinium, that's now been used about 80 million times around the world. Now sort of fast forward to Atossa Therapeutics, which I founded, and which is dedicated to both infectious diseases and oncology. And we're a clinical stage company. So it's really exciting to be here. We'll be telling you more about Atossa as we go forward here. I'd like to introduce my CFO and General Counsel, Kyle Guse.
Thanks, Steve. I hate following Dr. Quay because he has such an impressive background. I came to Atossa about 8 years ago. Prior to that, I was a CPA at one of the big four accounting firms, and I spent 20 plus years practicing law at some big international law firms where I focused on M&A transactions and capital markets work largely for biotech companies. And so that was my career before coming into Atossa. And now I'm in charge of finance, accounting, and legal for Atossa. So thanks everybody for having us here. We look forward to answering hopefully many of your questions here.
For sure. Well, again, Tribe, thanks for sending and forwarding your questions today. I'm going to invite the company to tell a little bit more about Atossa at the beginning, but a quick reminder. We're going to try to get this all done in an efficient 30-minute session here. We've got a long list of questions, but if you do think of another, you can forward it through the Zoom chat, and we'll try to get that on. If not, we'll look forward to getting Dr. Quay and Kyle back on maybe in the first quarter if we don't get everything addressed today. It's okay. Companies are meant to evolve, and so are your questions. Thanks again. But yeah, gentlemen, maybe Steve, could you tell us a little bit about Atossa? And by the reminder, everyone, Atossa is on the NASDAQ, trades under the symbol ATOS. And so you can pull it up on your, whatever system you're using to check in with its financials, et cetera. Stephen, could you start with maybe introducing Atossa again and its programs?
Absolutely, John. So as a reminder, we are a clinical stage oncology and infectious disease company. As a reminder, clinical trials for pharmaceuticals involve 3 stages. Phase 1, which is primarily safety. Phase 2 is your first test of efficacy and safety in the patient population. And then phase 3 is the official trials that you do to support the labeling that allows you to market your drugs. After the gadolinium, I've invented actually 6 other drugs. So I've gone from sort of a white piece of paper and a pencil and drawing a molecule to getting FDA approval for 7 different drugs and formulations. So this is what I really have a passion for. So with respect to oncology, Our first program is in breast cancer. And our first program is to commercialize all of the aspects of a molecule called endoxifen, which is proprietary to Atossa. We're really excited about the IP we've developed around this. And its function is to block the action of estrogen on the estrogen receptor, which is really important for about 3 out of 4 breast cancers. So this term ER positive, you may have heard of, is estrogen receptor. That's what the ER stands for. When you look under the microscope, you see positive cells. And about 3 out of 4 breast cancers are ER positive. The good news is that many of those are well handled by current surgery, radiation, and chemo or other therapies. But there's a very large subset that's frankly larger than maybe triple negative or larger than HER2 positive of women who have ER positive breast cancer, but there's other things driving it that make it grow more quickly, be more aggressive. And that's the unmet medical need we're focusing on. This endoxifen molecule is quite unique. It doesn't structurally look at all like estrogen, but it fits the receptor better than estrogen or any other molecule that's ever been tested. So we really want to find the mets and bounds of what this molecule can do, not only in breast cancer, but in other areas. The estrogen receptor itself is a modulator of many, many functions in the cell. And there may actually be opportunities for us to look for other roles for endoxifen in the area of oncology. Specifically with endoxifen, we have a program looking at its pharmacodynamic or its clinical effect on a biomarker in humans, that is mammographic breast density. So we've completed regulatory requirements and IRB approvals, and we'll be beginning to recruit a 6-month trial in Sweden, where we're looking at women who have high breast density as a starting point. So basically they get a mammogram and their breasts are very, very white because dense breast tissue is white on mammography. And we're going to look in a placebo-controlled trial at 2 doses to seeing if we can modify that density over a 6-month period of time. We'll talk a little bit more about specific timing, but you've already heard me. We've covered some of the regulatory hurdles for that trial. It's 6 months long. We'll be talking about when we launch in a minute. Another important area is a little farther along, women who are newly diagnosed with breast cancer, ER positive breast cancer. And there's a window of opportunity, a period of time between the diagnosis of their breast cancer and the definitive surgery or the beginning of some other therapy. And this window of opportunity is a time where you can test whether giving a drug allows a very quick action because you have sort of the perfect experiment in a clinical setting. You'll have a biopsy to prove the diagnosis. You'll have a 2, 3, 4 week or few month period of time of treatment. Then you'll have an additional biopsy, maybe it's an excisional biopsy to remove the cancer. And you now have 2 specimens that you can compare analytically and with very, very good experimental controls. So this neoadjuvant treatment is very common with non-estrogen driven cancers. So for those 1/4 of women with breast cancer that are not ER positive, there is very typically therapy given. Sort of a woman goes in with her partner, significant other, gets her diagnosis, is not pretty upset about learning she has breast cancer, but is given a prescription and will immediately begin treatment to modify the growth of that cancer. That currently is not what's going on with ER positive, and that's the unmet need we'd like to address with endoxifen. We conducted a window of opportunity trial in Australia and frankly powered it to do between 15 and 20 patients, excuse me. And in fact, the early findings indicated that we really should stop that trial and move very quickly into the regulatory process in the US. And we're now going to have a meeting with the FDA to discuss some of the design issues around that trial. So 2 programs in breast cancer, although we have ambitions to be in broader aspects of oncology. Mammographic breast density as a pharmacodynamic safety endpoint, and then the neoadjuvant setting. And we have 2 programs in infectious diseases. Those are both focused on COVID and both focused on 2 different aspects of COVID. Now, probably before I get into any of our programs, you want to know, well, we have this this brand new variant. It seems to be spreading out of South Africa. What is its relationship with the therapeutics that were developed here at Atossa? And I think the answer in the Twitter version would be it's good news in the sense of being able to treat it. When we developed these two treatment formats, a nasal spray and a nebulized form, we focused on the single feature of SARS-CoV-2 that makes it different from all other beta coronaviruses, and that is responsible for its increased infectivity. That's the furin cleavage site. So if it loses that site, we don't have any experiments to know very well what would happen clinically, but all indications in a laboratory setting would be if it lost that site, it would be almost non-infective. So targeting the site that's responsible for infections means that no matter what the virus tries to do with the other aspects of its surface, our therapeutics will still be be able to treat it. The nasal spray program is finishing some non-clinical studies to support clinical trials, and we are gradually increasing the dose and frequency of the nebulized inhaled program that's being conducted in phase 1 subjects in Australia. So probably more than people that know about the company in terms of an overview, but I want to be sure that I bring everyone up to the commonality of where we are as we sit looking at 2022, which is 2 programs in oncology and infectious diseases in the clinic and some really strong milestones coming up. I'll turn it back to you, John.
Yeah, I guess, thank you, Stephen. It's very exciting, the breadth of research that you are conducting at Atossa. It's always fascinating me. And with your breadth of patents too, that and intellectual property here, maybe you could speak a little bit more to that, but that is a potentially, quote unquote, a gold mine that you're sitting on as well, that you brought to the table for Atossa. Could you speak to that quickly before we go to Kyle?
Well, sure, yeah. So again, having done as many companies, 7 drugs and FDA approved, I've obviously been involved with a lot of patents and have 87 issued patents. So the value of the patent portfolio of a company really accrues behind the scenes quietly as the products develop. Because at the time when a company is sold to a large pharmaceutical company or a product is launched and major valuation increments are met, the foundation of those is the IP protection around the product. So it's kind of your back office, if I could call it that, for a pharmaceutical company, but absolutely essential. Because if you don't have your patent family in line and in place, it's a bit of a house of cards. So we have a very strong foundation here around IP, around all our programs. It's really part of the culture of Atossa from the very beginning. And based on my own success in getting 7 drugs approved and really generating billions of dollars of revenue for the drugs that I invented.
One of those 7 drugs, was it in the nasal spray form? If I'm not mistaken, you've had experience in that area, right?
Well, yes. 2 of the drugs are nasal sprays. One's for anemia and one's for osteoporosis. And they are currently, being marketed by Endo Pharmaceuticals in various forms. So it was kind of a unique opportunity to dip back into some of my prior experience because, again, I don't want to get into the weeds, but nasal spray formulations are a bit of the rocket science of pharmaceuticals, if I can call it that, because there's a huge amount of physics around the spray plumes that are generated using laser light scattering and density measurements and that sort of thing. So a lot of really hardcore physics and chemistry behind a pharmaceutical that is typically a biological or a medical product. So it's one of the harder things to develop, and it was grateful that I could bring to bear some of that prior knowledge to affect the COVID situation.
Fantastic. By the way, I probably should have mentioned, instead of virtual gold mine, maybe cryptocurrency or Bitcoin mining today. Maybe I should have mentioned that. It's amazing where the world is headed here. But if you will, maybe skip over to Kyle. Maybe you could speak from your perspective as the CFO about your cash position, et cetera. Maybe could you give us a little color on
Yeah, quick overview. As of September 30th, we had $140 million in cash in the bank. We had no debt. And you can see through the first 3 quarters of this year that we were burning about $4.2 million per quarter. So, everything's relational. Our cash balance and our balance sheet is very strong. To put things in perspective, 12 months ago, we had $10 million in cash and a $20 million market cap. So we're, have really transformed the company over the last 12 months. And people should understand that. We get questions all the time about, well, your stock has come down off its 52-week high. What are you doing about that? That's bad. Well, okay, it's 300% down off its 52-week high, but it's also up 300% off its 52-week low. So I'd like to think of it as the glass half full there. We've really transformed the company into a multi-$100 million market cap company over the last 12 months.
Yeah, congratulations on doing that. It's exciting to see, and I'm excited to see what with the 140 million reported, where you're taking this company and really the position that it's put you in. One from a development standpoint, and even possibly from an acquisition standpoint. Some of the ways I've seen biotech companies develop, and the main source is having the capital to go after it and the currency, and so excited to see where you're going to be taking this company. Let's get into some of the tribe's questions here, if you will. The first one is, do we have any initial feedback from FDA for the 505(b)(2) filing for the WO use of oral endoxifen? If yes, what was it? I guess, Kyle, maybe you could address that.
Yeah, no, our meeting is scheduled with the FDA in December, and so we don't have that feedback yet. We have not announced a specific date in December because dates can change for unforeseen reasons, but we have the meeting coming up with them here in December and should have a response from them.
Okay, great.
Soon.
So that's coming up real soon. December is around the corner. Why were the funds, here's the next question, why were the funds from R&D used towards stock-based compensation for employees? This is not a typical use of R&D funds. This is one of the tribe's questions.
Yeah, I'll take that. I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding there. Stock-based compensation, by definition is compensation based on stock options, restricted stock, et cetera. It's not based on cash. And so I think there's a misunderstanding there. It's very common for U.S. companies to compensate its employees, including employees in the R&D department, with non-cash compensation, including options, which is what we do for all of our employees. It's a way to conserve the company's cash and align the employees' incentives with the incentives of the stockholders, which is to create shareholder value. And so I think there was just a misunderstanding in that question, but hopefully that clears it up a little bit.
Well, it's a great thing about, I think this type of session is to, really understand the value of the company, but also, disprove any sort of misunderstandings in the marketplace. So thanks for being available to handle these. The next one is the current 10Q suggests that the 140 million will provide a runway of at least 12 months. Currently, Atossa uses about 4.2 million per quarter, as you mentioned. Can you elaborate where the accelerated use of the funds is going to be, specifically which trial or which pipeline? Kyle, I guess that's probably directed back towards you.
Yeah. The reference to the 12 months in our financial statements is really an accounting requirement to make it clear that we don't have a going concern issue with the company. And so people sometimes see that 12 months and think, oh, you only have 12 months. That's not what it says. It says we have at least 12 months. And then the other part of that question, what are we doing to accelerate our programs and utilize some of that cash? I think the primary area of acceleration is in our endoxifen program, and particularly with our window of opportunity, or as we also call it, neoadjuvant indication that we're pursuing. And so we're accelerating that in the United States. We're able to terminate a study early this year based on overwhelmingly positive results. We have a meeting now set with the FDA to hopefully get their input in December on the next steps for that program here in the United States. That's where we'd like to take the program, conduct future studies, and that's where we're really focusing our efforts in terms of acceleration.
Okay. Thank you, Kyle. The next question from the tribe was, why has the management and PR been silent since the no vote? Now that the no vote to add more shares, which would have been used for partnership, are not there, what's the plan? Kyle, I think.
Let me just see if we've been mostly silent because I don't think there's a whole lot to say about it. I mean, our proposal was to increase our authorized shares for potential future uses, and the stockholders, according to the way the voting rules work, didn't agree with that, and so it didn't pass. And that's, I'm not sure what else to say about it other than that. We are continuing to evaluate it, though, and including for a potential future special meeting, or include the proposal in a future general meeting, because as management, we do believe that having authorized shares that have not been spoken for is a necessary tool for a number of purposes. One is, successful biotech companies typically do not ultimately succeed with the programs they started with. Right? They'll collaborate along the way. They'll acquire new technologies. So how are we going to do that? Are we going to utilize our precious cash? Maybe, but it might make more sense to use stock to finance these potential collaborations, acquisitions, etc. And so these authorized shares are really to add a tool to the toolbox that, frankly, our competitors have, and we're at a competitive disadvantage if we can't offer stock. And finally, I would challenge people to find a highly successful biotech company that does not have authorized shares of stock that they can use. So, part of my job is to make us look and feel like a highly successful, much larger biotechnology company. And this is one way to do that, to create some authorized shares to facilitate these future transactions.
Yeah, John, if I can just pipe in there, after a few decades of negotiating these kinds of things. So not atypical situation is you go out and you find some great technology and some bright young folks who have come up with it, and you want to bring it in-house. And maybe they want some money at the time that you do that particular transaction, but they want to be part of the growth of the thing they brought with them. And the way you do that is you reward them with stock from the company. So in a sense that their contribution, not only they do gets a financial benefit on the day of the transaction, but they get to have some of that benefit accrue. And I'm really kind of surprised, but that this didn't pass, given that this is so part of the fabric of biotechnology. But as Kyle said, we'll always continue to evaluate it, because we are always going to do what we think is in the best interest of the shareholders. That's what this proposal was, and we will continue to do that despite this vote.
It's my experience, gentlemen, and I've been at this for a while now too. And as you know, and many of you know on this, I've been on the banking side and the fund side and advisory side of this business, and particularly biotech and pharmaceutical companies for 20 plus years now. And I have seen this played out before. And one of the things that, from my experience in evaluating these situations in the past, is that the institutional world around this typically is, one has to vote because it's a responsibility. And usually when they vote, they usually vote for approval when it comes to authorization. I know that your institutional base year over year has grown quite significantly. Could you speak, in this case, was the institutional crowd that voted, I think all of them had to vote, did they primarily vote in a positive way? Can you speak to that or not? But I thought it might be an interesting point to make here.
Yeah, I can probably speak to that. The institutions have a fiduciary duty in general to vote on proposals. And so the voting turnout from institutions was much higher than from retail. Of the people that did vote, the vast majority voted in favor of the proposal. The issue was that not enough people turned out to vote. If more people would have turned out to vote in the same ratio that they were voting when they did turn out, the proposal would have passed. Just to put a finer point on it, if we are talking to a potential business to acquire maybe another oncology program, and they are interested in participating in the upside and having equity in the combined company, it would be very difficult to tell them, well, our stockholders aren't going to allow us to issue more shares yet. We need to go back and ask for approval. We'll talk to you again in a couple months once that works out. I mean, we're dead in the water with a strategy like that. So this is really a useful and, I'd go so far as to say necessary tool.
Sure. No, I would agree. I, for one, say that one of the things that we've all learned today is that, one, as a shareholder, we have a right to vote. One, just like a citizen of the United States or wherever a country you are, if you have the right to vote, exercise it. And that, first and foremost, that's the first thing. And the second thing is yes, this is a growth company. Growth companies use shares to grow their company, and they need authorized to do so. So hopefully, at some point, it's my personal wish that this happens sometime in the near future as well. Let's move on here because we got a few more questions here and want to be efficient. Let's see. Can you put approximate timelines for all items in the pipelines? I guess this is maybe directed to Steve.
Well, I can. I sometimes know more than I should be talking about in this space. So I sometimes leave these questions to Kyle. But so we've spoken about the program in Sweden, which I think the next step is going to be beginning to recruit patients. And coming up to the end of the year, that sometimes gets in the way of patient recruitment, but that's a very near-term event. We've spoken about a meeting in December with the FDA, giving us guidance around next steps for our US launch of endoxifen programs. We have a phase 1 trial of the nebulized formulation in Australia, which we'll continue to give updates on. We've completed 2 cohorts and are now dosing in the 3rd cohort, which is we increase the dose and then we increase the frequency of the material. And then finally, the nasal spray program has non-clinical studies which are being completed to allow us to begin clinical trials there. So I think a lot of milestones in the first half of 2022, and I think I can't emphasize enough that we are aggressively looking at additional programs in oncology and infectious diseases to broaden our portfolio and to make use of some of the intrinsic assets we have internally.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Anything to add, Kyle? Or you?
Well, we did update our corporate slide deck, which we always keep on our website, and we posted that this morning. So I would encourage people to look at that and read through it.
Okay. Just a point of clarification, it seems like there was a couple questions in regards to the authorized shares. And why not do a stock split to get extra shares? Obviously, that's not, maybe Kyle could speak to that if you want, but obviously, could you just explain that, why that's not possible?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose anything's possible. The sense I get from our stockholders is that they don't like reverse stock splits. And so that's not been our first choice of ways to create more authorized shares.
Yeah. Just that had come up in the meantime a few times. I thought I might go address that. The next question is, what has the increase in institutional investment changed? Any insights from Edge would be appreciated.
Well, we have seen institutional holdings continue to grow throughout the year. I mean, I think it's been driven by a number of things. One is our significantly improved balance sheet, I think, is attracting more sophisticated institutional investors. I think the progress we've had with our programs is attracting institutional investors. And I think inclusion in the Russell 2000-3000 has also attracted a lot of new institutional investors. And so we have seen a growth in that part of our shareholder base. 12 months ago, it was predominantly retail investors. And we've seen a significant increase in the institutions.
Great. Back on the science side, who has Atossa contacted with to help navigate the 505B application for oral endoxifen? Can you divulge the name? A name Dr. Getz keeps coming up by a number of folks. Maybe could you speak to that, Kyle, I guess, or?
Yeah, I mean, we don't really comment on the names of the parties that we contract with. We largely have confidentiality agreements with third parties, and so we don't typically mention the name of I'll call them vendors, but other parties to contracts with us. Dr. Getz's name comes up because he's one of the leaders in conducting research with a form of endoxifen. And so we're following what he does very closely because it's absolutely supportive of what we are doing with our proprietary endoxifen.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Says, switching to your other program, says, are you planning a similar 505(b)(2) pathway for ATH201 and AT301? Or would you be going for approvals in Europe first? Any clarity here would help.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit early to talk about the path for those programs, but as you know, a lot of the COVID vaccines and therapeutics took the emergency use authorization path, which is very common in this space. And unfortunately, for the way COVID is continuing to evolve, there's going to continue to be a strong need for therapeutics, perhaps new vaccines in this space. But it would be premature to talk about the pathway. Although, if I had to bet right now, would be the emergency use authorization, which I believe is present both in the U.S. and there's a European equivalent to that, or a non-U.S. equivalent to that. I think many countries have it on an individual basis.
Yeah, I think you just answered this, but what is the next question is, what is the current status of AT301? Per last update, there were preclinical trials to be completed before moving on to phase 2. Phase 1 was completed January 2021.
Yeah, we are continuing to do preclinical trials. That is the status of it, and when those are completed and when we can pivot to doing clinical trials, we'll speak to that.
Okay. Kind of follow on again. Any updates at H201 phase 2? What's going on? How's the enrollment? When do you expect to complete the trial?
Yeah. So again, the trial is a nebulized version of two pharmaceuticals that have a synergistic effect, if I can call it that, on preventing the spike protein to facilitate entry into ACE2 containing cells in the lung. So it's the design of the trial is a single dose in a group, and then a safety panel, which I am an observer member of as a physician and as the sponsor's physician, and then additional doses per day, getting to 3 doses per day. And then we'll be able to pivot into patients with COVID. So the trial's going along. We've had two meetings that have led to the conclusion that it was safe to go to the next cohort, the next higher level of dose and frequency. And we'll continue to update you as that progresses.
Okay. Thank you.
And we do plan, John, to finish the part A of that study in the first quarter of 2022. So that's one of our near-term milestones, is finishing up the first part of that study.
Got it. Thank you. Switching back to endoxifen, when do you expect to complete the study of oral endoxifen in women with MBD? How is the enrollment and any interim updates?
Yeah, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, we will begin recruiting very soon, either in December or early January, for the trial. It's a 6-month placebo-controlled double-blind trial. So recruitment will begin at some point in time, and then each woman in the trial will be six months in duration. People said, well, why did you go to Sweden for a trial like that? The answer is that Dr. Perhall is probably the world's leader in having a collection of women under study that he's had for almost a decade now, about 70,000 women, that he can bring into clinical trials in a very efficient fashion. And there's really very few places in the world that have that particular set of features. So, we didn't go there for any other reason than the fact that we always look for the best investigators in our studies, and he was the leader in this particular space.
Thank you. Going on with endoxifen, it says, will you seek to partner endoxifen in 2022 to carry on or fund a phase 3 if the 505(b) process is not successful?
Yeah, so I mean, the partnering decision is both a business and medical and science decision, but and again, we're always looking to maximize shareholder value. You typically can do that some point after having some significant phase 2 data and an understanding from the FDA with what the phase 3 program will be for ultimate approval. So everyone, the accountants can sharpen their pencils and come up with a market potential. So that point in time, phase 2 data completed, agreement from the FDA on what phase 3 will look like. So the parameters around size and that. You can sometimes start that study yourself and partner during that. You sometimes partner at the beginning of that, but that's the kind of point you should be looking for Atossa seeking a partner. We're clearly not there, but 2022 is going to be really exciting with our neoadjuvant and endoxifen program.
Okay. Stephen, I think you've already addressed why you're doing trials in Sweden. Maybe Kyle, could you speak to why you're doing trials in Australia?
Yeah, I mean, Australia offers a wonderful rebate for qualified R&D dollars spent there. It's 42 cents on the dollar spent there is sent back to us by way of a check every year. And so just to be clear, this is not a tax deduction. This is not a credit off some future taxes you owe. This is a check we get in the mail from the Australian government for spending R&D dollars there. So that is a huge incentive. On top of that, Australia, maybe partially because of the tax incentive or the tax rebate, is probably one of the top 5 venues to conduct early stage studies in the world. They're very highly respected. They're very experienced in these early stage studies. And so those are the reasons we're doing the studies there. Cheaper, faster, I guess is what I would say.
Makes sense. There's a follow-up question there. Are you not required to conduct trials here again, which will cost more money, take further time? Well,
yeah, I mean, I think our goal, our broader goal is to bring our programs into the United States and get approvals in the United States. The question is, how do you get there the fastest? And by spending the fewest dollars. The US FDA will accept well-controlled, well-conducted studies in other countries. And so we fully expect that the studies we're doing in Sweden or in Australia will be part of our FDA submission and will be a valuable part of our package here, and by and large accepted by the US FDA.
Yeah, I mean, John, we're following the path that I and other companies have followed, again for decades here, which is to do your phase 1 trial in normals in a place like Australia where you have English language documents and high quality research, and maybe an early proof of principle wherever you can get the most patients the quickest. And then you pivot at the end of phase 2, phase 3 into the US for approval. And this is exactly the playbook that I think the shareholders would appreciate and gets us there the quickest.
Makes sense. Thank you. Here's sort of a summary sort of question. What would you tell investors in the near term and long term? Why should they keep invested in Atossa and ATOS, and such that can support operations you're feeling confident investor will return on their investment? How would you respond to that? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, sure. So I mean, a year ago, I mean, biotech companies sort of have they have 2 fuels. They have money and they have ideas and products and that sort of thing. And a year ago, we had great products and not much money, and now we have great products and a lot of money. This next year, I mean, if you saw what we could do with 20 million in the bank in the last 12 months, I think you should kind of imagine what we can do with our current balance sheet and our current programs where they are. We've also obviously, I've never had patient recruitment issues like we did during the COVID process, and that continue to pop up in new ways. So being able to advance clinical programs during the greatest pandemic in the last century, increasing our balance sheet. I mean, I think if a management team need to be tested by fire, by the crucible of fire over the last year and come out on the other end, I think we stand in very good position for the next year, and the next year is really exciting.
Sure. Maybe it makes sense. It's an opportunity to sort of review your near-term and milestones, over the next, from start. It sounds like it's my understanding as early as December here, you've got milestones on the docket here. Could you maybe review those?
Yeah, I mean, I can roll through those, John. And again, they're in our PowerPoint presentation we put up on the website. But These are milestones that are coming up, in the next 30 days, or in one case in the next quarter. So we will commence the endoxifen study in Stockholm, Sweden by the end of the year. We will hold the meeting with the FDA about the potential pathway for our neoadjuvant endoxifen program here in the United States. We'll have that meeting in December. We will finish part A of our inhalation therapy, H201 as we call it, in the first quarter of 2022. So these are all very important, significant milestones that'll show that we're executing on our plan, and we're driving shareholder value. And these are coming up very soon. So I don't mean to be too short-term focused, but those are the reasons to stay in the stock, certainly in the near term, and for the longer term, for all the reasons Steve's been talking about.
Sure. Quick follow-up on the drugs. There's a question that just surfaced. Says, can there be any argument for that there might be an emergency approval for anything in your pipeline currently? What would you say to that? Is that a possibility from the FDA standpoint, or any?
Well, I mean, I guess it's to me it's too speculative to be talking about. The regulatory approval process is where we are. So
Yeah.
I think I've already mentioned that COVID therapeutics are likely to be first approved through the emergency use authorization. I think that's as much as I can say on that.
Okay. Quick question in regards to the Mayo Clinic. I don't know if you can comment on this or not, but it says they're doing a lot of research in and around endoxifen. Is there any relationship or possible partnership or any patent infringement possibilities, anything of that nature around what you're doing and what they're doing?
Well, there's no current relationship, and as I think Kyle has mentioned, Dr. Matthew Getz is one of the world's leaders in moving in looking at the academic uses of endoxifen in breast cancer and in other areas, and so it would be appropriate to be watching what he's doing, but there is no relation. There is no current relationship with the institution or Dr. Getz.
Okay. I think we've kind of summarize almost everything, and we've gone over the time that you've allotted. I do appreciate you guys allowing us to take a bit of your day and help us understand the growth and opportunities that you have at Atossa. I guess I would turn it back to you quickly. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing this? And again, know the invitation's there. I know there's going to be questions that I missed today. Do apologize, Tribe. We'll do our best, but and do remind you that if you missed anything in the early part of this, I'll try by later today, if not tomorrow, to get up the video on our YouTube channel at Tribe Public's YouTube channel, and you can review and or view it if you didn't get to see the whole thing. If you have others that that missed it, you might want to pass it on to. Is there anything, guys, you would like to add in conclusion?
Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that we appreciate everyone's support. I mean, the things that we're doing at Atossa are, truly remarkable. We're solving the world's greatest healthcare problems in COVID-19 and breast cancer. So we appreciate the support, and we hope you'll continue to provide support as our stockholders. It's critical to our success. Yeah,
I agree, Kyle. I mean, part of the reason we went over is I hope you're sensing the enthusiasm we both have for the mission we're on, which is to save lives, to improve the quality of life for people with cancers, for people with infectious diseases, COVID, and we're going to continue to do that. And we really appreciate the last year of support we've had. Our programs are strong, our balance sheet is strong, and 2022 is going to be a very good year for Atossa Therapeutics.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Tribe, for joining us. Look forward to having you back on the program soon. And here's a wish for much success for you and Atossa and all of us shareholders. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, John.
Thanks a lot, John.